All right, everybody. Happy Friday. Welcome back to the Pleb Underground, the signal without the slop. I am your host, Phil. Guys, I told you, I've got a very special guest today, return guest, friend to the show, right? Got the creator of Seedsigner, the gentleman that goes by the name of Seed. That's right. And we are going to sit down. We're going to talk about what's going on with Seedsigner, any new developments. Seed and I will both be at the Tab Conf. If you want to come and join us at the Tab Conference for some actual Bitcoin signal, tickets are in the show notes. Not a ref link. I don't get anything for it. I'm just there. And we're going to be doing the news desk with Ulrich, and we're going to be having fun. Anyways, guys, you know the deal. We're going to show some love to the Pleb Underground sponsor before we bring Seed onto the stage, and we are going to talk about it all. We're going to talk about the paper Bitcoin summer. We're going to talk about the ridiculous narratives. We're going to talk about the developments and where Seedsigner is going. And yeah, so get ready, guys. Grab your coffee. Depends on what time of the day it is for you. For me, it's coffee time. For you, it might be whiskey time. Who knows? So grab your favorite drink, and we will be right back and dive right into it. Here we go. Pleb Underground is sponsored by Archimedes Emporium. Discover the pinnacle of precision engineering, starting with their Bitcoin logo wall clock, meticulously machined in Maine from a solid block of aerospace-grade aluminum, ensuring unparalleled durability and performance. Experience the difference of a product made without compromise. Head on over to Archimedes Emporium. All right. Welcome to the show once again. Seed, how you doing, man?
Hey, it's cool to be hanging out with you today.
Absolutely awesome. Yes, it is. I feel like it's this one took a little while for us to get going. I feel like there was a lot of back and forth. I was gonna have you back on the show I feel like a month ago or so, but things got busy. Anyways.
Yeah, summer's the busy time. I'm mostly a stay-at-home dad, and so with the kids at home, things get busy and stuff. But I have been not a daily watcher, but in the middle of the day when I have a few minutes when I sit down and eat lunch, a lot of times I pull up your daily show and watch some of your takes. So I've been keeping up, I guess.
Uh-oh. Well, I appreciate it, and also I'll apologize offended you. But yeah, that's yeah, man, I really appreciate that. I kind of want to, you know what? Why not? We're gonna just dive into the drama before we start talking about what you're doing at Seedsigner. I figured why not? Let's just go right into the drama. I guess we'll start with how's your paper Bitcoin summer going? I know you're at home with the kids, making the memories. How's paper Bitcoin affecting you this summer?
I keep reading about paper Bitcoin, but one sat equals one sat still for me. So I haven't yet delved into any paper Bitcoin financially.
Okay. So no lure of the siren song, huh? The siren's not calling you out to the sea.
Not me personally, but many of the newcomers are being fleeced by it. Yeah.
So I guess what are your thoughts? Is this a net positive? Like when you're hearing the narratives, right? That this is what adoption looks like, and the 5D chess, and then we've got the magic buzzwords like accretive dilution and stuff like that. What are your thoughts? Or I mean, is
I
there
mean
any truth to this? Is it just being
the
harsh?
best scams, the best FUD, they all mix some truth with lies or deception.
Mm.
And the whole this is what adoption looks like. I personally think that companies holding Bitcoin is a positive and natural development in the space. And if it's companies holding Bitcoin, buying and holding Bitcoin for a rainy day or to save their margins for some sort of significant product development investment, or for when business cycles are a thing, and
Mm-hmm.
especially if you have a seasonal business, it could be annually seasonal where you're busier around Christmas time or busier in the summer, whatever your business is. Like, there are times when you have more revenue and times when you have less. And if you're buying and holding Bitcoin to smooth out the bumps, or all these other ways Bitcoin can advantage a business, I think that's awesome and naturally aligns with Bitcoin in terms of incentives. But if you're if you're a penny stock or a dying company that is looking to, you know, pump your stock price so that you can stay listed in the NASDAQ or any of these, other kind of things, like they're, I don't know, every cycle has its own shit coins, and apparently treasury stocks are going to be the shit coins of this cycle, where people who are in positions of media influence or who have, a platform with a lot of visibility, they're going to be twisting the truth to sell these narratives that, pick your terminology, shares are accretive or MNAV or dilution or whatever it is for this cycle. But that's my take. It's a mix of, it's great that companies are holding Bitcoin to honestly kind of store some of their margin and value for the future. But if it's just going to be used as a scam to fleece the plebs, then it's garbage.
It's kind of interesting that you say that, a scam to fleece the plebs, because there was this IT company. And again, I'm not saying that this was a scam. I'm just saying that this was a very interesting situation that happened. The head guy from this company started showing up in pleb spaces. They had some pleb investors, right? The minimum investment is something like $6,000, and they're going to be buying Bitcoin, right? And they're hoping to go public, and they're hoping to issue shares. So he came onto Twitter, did a bunch of spaces, and gone. haven't seen him since he did his raising round. Now again,
Right.
I'm not necessarily judging that, per se, because who knows? Maybe that, right? Maybe what it is that they're doing is legitimate, and they weren't just looking to kick the can down the road. However, to your point, I think that you and I are aligned in that we want to see, if a business is going to hold Bitcoin, that they should be able to sustain themselves without the one-trick pony of using Bitcoin in order to kick the can down the road. Like, we're actually looking to have businesses with real products and services that are holding Bitcoin and accumulating Bitcoin. And on that note, I am curious, what are your thoughts? Because I do think about this, and I haven't been able to come up with a good reason why, but what are your thoughts on why aren't we getting better quality businesses that are cash flow positive, right? But why aren't we getting more of those coming and stacking Bitcoin? I mean, Bitcoin's been here for 16 years. It's clearly, in my eyes, obviously, has proven itself beyond the shadow of a doubt. It's proving every day its anti-fragility. And it's just so strange that these companies that genuinely do have these massive melting ice cubes just don't care.
I think just because, what do they say? Empty barrels make the most noise. I think that just because the companies that are doing this, we're not hearing as much about it. I think that a lot of companies are doing this. I think if you follow, River is a company that I like and to some degree trust. At least in terms of being a Bitcoin broker and providing excellent service. Like, I'm a fan of River, and their CEO pretty regularly puts tweets out about companies that he's aware of that are onboarding into River, and who are, the plumbers, the plumber around the corner, or the grocery store on the other side of town, or these kind of like more small to local businesses. I'd like to think that those are being posted in good faith, and that there is some adoption going on behind the scenes that we're not privy to, because they're small companies and they don't do press releases when they buy a Bitcoin. That said,
a good point.
Like, the one thing that the Bitcoin ecosystem, and I dislike that term, but the Bitcoin ecosystem has a lot of enthusiastic retail level participants who, when they first hear about Bitcoin, are excited and engage with, a number of media platforms in their attempt to follow and understand and learn more about Bitcoin. And what that does is creates this tremendous monetization opportunity for the savvy operators in the space, whether that's selling booths or sponsorships for a conference, or ads on a large podcast, or whether it's selling, ordinals or JPEGs that are supposed to be on the Bitcoin blockchain, or whether it's selling the latest treasury stock, or whether it was selling scam coins back in 2017, or DeFi, or whatever. There's a bunch of, unfortunately, less savvy people that are very enthusiastic about Bitcoin and the attached crypto space. And so the good news, with back to your original question, with the whole corporate treasury thing, is a lot of people, including myself, have been saying that over time, the impact or the benefit from announcing that you're the Bitcoin treasury company is going to diminish over time, because as more companies buy Bitcoin, it just becomes less of a PR grab, or less of like an opportunity to sell your stock to Bitcoiners at large. So maybe we're getting to that point where it's diluted, and it's less of a headline that your company is buying Bitcoin or has an accretive strategy, or however they like to say it. But I don't know. Those are my thoughts. It's in some ways, Bitcoin is a scammer's paradise.
Yeah, it really is. It really is a double-edged sword. To your point about the diminishing returns on, announcing that, you're going to be a Bitcoin treasury company, that could explain why these particular types of businesses are the first ones to the table, because they need, like, they really need that jump, right? Like, this is literally what's keeping the lights on. Like, because I've been, so look, I've been reviewing almost every single one of these companies, the ones that are announcing that they're starting a Bitcoin treasury and stuff like that. And I mean, the majority of them, if not almost all of them, with the exception of maybe a handful, it's just reverse splits on the shares, and the chart down and to the right, trending to zero. So that's
And I think we expected to see, as inflation goes crazy, and as the top 7 stocks in the Nasdaq absorb more and more of, the value in the market, and as inflation happens, we see more of these zombie companies that subsist on debt, and that are becoming increasingly squeezed to be able to borrow money at the rates they need to be able to keep the company going. So it's like, I guess this, for a small portion of those zombie companies, this is maybe a short-term strategy for trying to get to the next quarter.
it's worth it, right? It is worth it for them. And in all fairness, I have definitely worked with businesses and for businesses where only the quarter matters, right? Like, they're not even, it's like they're not even really looking down the road. They are just trying to make it to the next quarter. And this was before COVID. So, something to think about. Okay.
It makes you think there's some sort of reckoning in the works, but who
Yeah.
knows? These things take longer to fall apart than we ever think. So we'll see.
They do. They do take longer to fall apart. And I also, to your point, I believe that right now we are in the bubble making business, right? Like, and I'm not saying bubble as in like, oh, the Bitcoin bubble. As you know, our economic system is the cycles of booms and busts. So we're in the middle of, I don't know where in the stage we are of building the boom, but we're building it up. Like, you can see it. You can actually see it happening with, with the different regulations, and how, of course, right, Donald Trump has, quote unquote, opened up the crypto landscape, to all of these businesses. I think that there's a lot of people that weren't here in 2017, 2016. They aren't aware of what that ICO market was really like. I think that people can't really appreciate that.
Right. It's new waves, and like something that's especially frustrating for people like me, and I assume people like you, is that once you sort of absorb the ethos of Bitcoin, you expect that Bitcoin adjacent people and companies and participants, you kind of expect them to be operating at a higher standard. And to some
Right?
degree, that is true. There are a lot of good people who are into Bitcoin and who are public Bitcoiners. But there's, as we just talked about there does attract some people whose ethos and incentives aren't really, in alignment with what Bitcoin is trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. All right, we're gonna change gears away from the Bitcoin, the slop, okay, from the treasury slop.
I feel down. Let's talk
I
about
know, that's
something
why.
lighter.
Oh, it's not. I don't know if this is going to be lighter, but I'm kind of like building up to talking about Seedsigner. I kind of want to save that, towards the end. So it's kind of like the last thing that people think about is, the great work that you're doing, before we finish the show. So I think before we get to that point, though, I definitely want your take about the knots versus core drama.
Oof.
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna dive into there. I know it's a tough one because it is polarizing, and I noticed that there's obviously quite a few people that just avoid talking about it altogether because hey, you don't want to lose viewers and stuff like that. But at the same time, I think it is just incredibly important to actually have these conversations, right? Like it's to me, it's obviously this is contentious. Obviously, there are a lot of people that are. I I believe there are a lot of people that are just simply looking for direction. I think that this is again a case of people wanting to be told what to think. And the reason why I used this tweet, right, was because you retweeted Antoine, who has been a big proponent, I'd say, against quote unquote against knots. So
Right.
this was kind of funny. Your post. You said you don't need to be a subject matter expert to detect bullshit. Can confirm being a cop, even for a brief period of time, will enormously enhance your BS detector. So I guess I'm gonna start by asking you just overall, in general, high level view. What do you think of this whole situation?
I think it's a legitimate and yet nuanced technical decision, and I think that you can argue if you're somebody who's and I am not the most technical Bitcoiner. I have been trying to ask a lot of questions so I can understand and appreciate some of the nuance about this, but I think you can
Mhm.
argue either side in good faith. Um, I really do believe that, and I have a number of Bitcoiner friends who think this is a big distraction, but when it comes down to it, they probably align themselves more with the decisions that Core has made. And I think you can make that technical argument. I think I think it's a distraction. I think Bitcoin is going to keep Bitcoining, and over time, I think it'd be a positive development if we see alternative clients gain in popularity, uh, because the protocol is the point for consensus. And Bitcoin Core is a reference implementation, but right there in the name, it's a reference implementation, which implies that there should be other implementations that look at what Core does and evaluate, the technical decisions they're making and decide whether or not, like, there's a million issues to arbitrate, but like Core implemented X really well, or Core implemented Y really well, or maybe I don't agree with the way that Core is handling Z, but I I I I hope we do see more. I mean, right now on the network, we kind of have three implementations. We have the knots implementation. We have the kind of core I'm not updating crowd, and then we have the people that are updating the latest core stuff. And I've said this on Twitter, like I'm in the core. Is it 28 club, which is like just until I have more information or have a better
Yeah.
understanding, a sense of things, like, hey, I'm just kind of sticking with that and not going to be updating for a while.
Now, I just want to point out, Knott's supporters, not all of them, right? So I'm painting with a broad brush, but certain ones that I've spoken to would classify the not upgrading crowd as supporting Knott's. And I am also of that crowd. I just don't care. Like, I don't understand enough, and I'm not going to pretend to. So then I'm not just going to go and like push for one side, you know? To your point though, to about this whole thing, this discussion is nuanced. Number one. Number two, I do agree that both sides can be argued faithfully. However, the one piece that kind of sticks me that like, okay, so this has been my whole problem, right? Is that I've been in the space long enough that even though it shouldn't matter uh, how Luke is personally, like the stuff that he has done throughout the time that I have been on Twitter, the fact that he quote unquote was hacked for all of his Bitcoin, and there was like 2 or 3 other situations that I don't even really recall anymore. Even besides that, I I just don't think necessarily that that is the correct answer to the problem. But at the same time, I also don't agree with core. And again, I have no idea what the motivations are, but placating to businesses that essentially are going to make subjective crap, I don't think is correct either. So I do believe that, like, you know, I do think that both of them definitely need to exist. And to your point, more implementations need to exist. But I believe that all these things need to happen so that the conversation can evolve. Like I just don't think we're really there yet. These are like the earliest stages. Like I think that sometimes we forget that Bitcoin is 16 years old and not 400 years old. So like I'm just not convinced. So for me, it's not about picking one side over the other, because I find that tribalism isn't helping anyone. Like I'm
And
seeing a lot of misinformation coming out of both camps, right? The people who have staked their decision on either side. So
right, one thing that comes to mind is I was watching an interview with Dave Collum recently, who is not super enthusiastic about Bitcoin, and he said something in that interview that really stuck with me.
mm,
Um, and it was that as this new money emerges, do you just think that the Rothschilds and the Morgans and all of the Vanderbilts and all of the wildly wealthy people are just going to kind of roll over and say like, well, I guess I have to buy Bitcoin or I'm going to be economically, you know, left out in the cold, or to some degree usurped, or whatever. And I think we do have to be aware that there are organizations, individuals, whatever you want to call it, with an interest in controlling Bitcoin or exerting influence over the development of Bitcoin to serve, is it to sell monkey JPEGs? It seems like, or is it to really start to infiltrate core to be able to make changes down the road that are, more substantial, and that, you know, through whatever technical nuance favor a given group.
mm,
Which, what I'm getting at with this is, maybe all of this, the conclusion to all of this is that we should be having a more serious conversation about ossification and shifting some of the bleeding edge development and innovation to layers
mm.
above Bitcoin, and other. I think you make an argument for ossification with what you and I are doing with Core V28 is, like, for the
Ossification.
moment, is a form of ossification. And
Yeah.
we're doing that because I am sympathetic to the people who say that Knots hasn't had enough eyeballs on it, and that it's primarily being developed by one. I know it's not just Luke, but Luke is
No,
kind
it's
of
not.
like the driving force behind a lot of the merges and pull requests and stuff. And I'm sensitive to companies that seem to be doing a significant portion of the funding for developers in Bitcoin Core. And what are the, what types of business, and what are the motivations that those companies, what kind of products, and what direction and influence? That's like another side note is, I'm not a big Michael Saylor fan, but maybe he's onto something when we need to think about providing almost unlimited funding to core devs. I mean, they need funding. We need to have, security updates and bug fixes and stuff like that. But in terms of major development initiatives or new capabilities for Bitcoin layer one, I mean, maybe we're exiting the time when that's really a reasonable thing that we should be exploring. I just saying some of these things off the top of my head.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
It's a big topic with a lot to think about, and those are kind of just some of the things I'm thinking about.
It is, and I appreciate you. I appreciate you just being candid about this, because that's one of the tough things is that people often end up trying to frame something in a way that is going to placate the people listening, instead of just actually trying to to work through the thought. So
And
yeah,
one more thing I'll throw out there is, like, I do honestly think that as Bitcoin becomes more of a vehicle for settlement, let's fast forward 5 years. Let's say the hopium was real. 5 years from now, Bitcoin's trading at more than $1 million, and it's starting to be used by transnational corporations and sovereign countries to settle debts between them. And we're seeing, large amounts of value being moved on the Bitcoin network on a daily basis. And as a result of these large sums being moved, fees are naturally rising up to the point where Bitcoin's becoming less and less economically viable for smaller transactions. So fees are just naturally rising up, and that's great because it helps supplement the security budget for Bitcoin as the block reward kind of fades away. So as this fee market develops, it becomes less and less economically viable to publish your monkey JPEG on the chain, or to publish the Bible on the chain, or whatever your pet project is on one side or the other. So basically, real economic activity crowds out these sort of data storage use cases. If we get to that point, and yet we've carved aside this opportune field that allows people to be able to put arbitrary data in the blockchain at a discount, which, if I'm understanding correctly, that's basically what it does.
Mm-hmm.
If we put that into the protocol, we've created a carve out for this that's going to be extremely difficult to remove down the road. So maybe in 5 years, fees sort out this whole data storage issue, and it turns into a non-issue because Bitcoin's being used at an economic scale that we have trouble wrapping our minds around at this point. And so we've created this carve out that is basically really difficult to summon the organizational will, if you will, or the protocol will, to cut it out, because it's just kind of been a thing, and a certain number of incumbents are using it. Once we lift this opportune limit and start normalizing putting arbitrary data in the blockchain, with no limit for that, I worry about the trajectory that sets things on. And so that's one of these things that's floating around in my head. And then there's plenty of nuance that I'm not capturing with this, but that's just one set of thoughts that I'm having.
Yeah, I think it's really important that that you mentioned that, right, about the businesses, because this is kind of the whole thing, right? It's like there's this framing where if you're not going to be a quote unquote NOTS supporter, then somehow that means that you're a spam apologist, right? Like, and that's a very rigid take, because the problem is this, right? Like you've got Bitcoin Core that is doing whatever it is that they're doing, and I don't necessarily agree. I don't necessarily think that creating situations where you could put a bunch of subjectively arbitrary data is really the right path for Bitcoin. I don't actually agree with that. However, the other piece of it is what I said before, right? Is that I'm not convinced that using knots, and essentially, unfortunately, it is a bit of a LARP, because you're only filtering out that initial block. As soon as that data gets into the blockchain, you're getting it anyways. Like once that block is confirmed and everything and comes back around, like all of that data is there. So so what do we do? So it's like you're stopping it. So it's like you're preventing it one time. And again, this is where it gets kind of, to me, like, this is where it gets kind of strange. And I don't disagree with the spirit of it, because again, like, we're here for, quote unquote, we're here for sound money, right? And this other stuff appears to just be crap. and I can't agree with that crap, but I also don't think this other thing is the right thing to do. So this is kind of where, in my eyes, we get to this situation of, are we looking for a needle in the haystack right now that essentially doesn't exist? It doesn't even exist yet. It's like we're looking to fix this thing that we think is broken in the future, but we're bringing it into the present. We're saying that it's broken now, and that it's breaking at an astronomically faster rate. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people think that this is a battle for like Bitcoin in terms of life and death of Bitcoin. It's like,
Maybe the good news,
yeah,
yeah, maybe the good news is that this just demonstrates that there are a ton of people who are really passionate about Bitcoin and paying attention. If there is an
good.
actual real existential threat to Bitcoin, like, we don't have to have any concerns that people aren't going to be on top of that if we're arguing about something that, there's, is it a critical issue right now? I mean, the good news is, like, Bitcoin has worked these problems out in the past, and there have been disagreements about technical direction and stuff. And TikTok next block, like, the chain just keeps growing, and that's that's encouraging, reassuring to think about.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely is.
I can't help but think about that. You've probably seen it. It's a meme with Willie the janitor from The Simpsons, and it's like
Yep.
Bitcoiners, are first angry at the fiat system, and they just get angrier and angrier and end up at the other angry at the other Bitcoiners. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Bitcoiners are Bitcoiners' biggest enemies. The other meme that it makes me think of is the one where, is Bitcoin dead? I don't know if you remember that meme. It's a good old meme,
Oh yeah.
right? Right? Has there been a block mined? Yes, Bitcoin's not dead. Like, it's so funny. But yeah, essentially, to Eastside Tony's point, yeah, the virtue signaling, unfortunately, this has been my feeling. And in all fairness, it's been my feeling because of the narratives that I have seen spun out, right? I've seen just flat out lies, and I think that that's not helping either. And I'm not just saying that this is being done on Knott's supporter side, but it's also being done on core supporter side as well, right? There's misinformation coming from both sides, and the framing that I've seen, like, let's say from some core people, is that Knott's people are acting like communists, and stuff like that, and they want to tell you what to do. But then at the same time, you've got some Knott's people that are putting out narratives like questioning, like Ava Chow's programming ability, or putting out that Bitcoin Core is malware. Like, that's not, like, I know that they think that this is like helping their cause and stuff like that.
Right.
But being hyperbolic about this and not actually having a proper discussion, it's not helping anyone. And this kind of goes to the point of, well, maybe the point is not to have the proper discussion, and maybe the point is just to psyop people into your point of view.
Or it's just, it's a messy informational landscape, and there
True.
are a lot of malincentives for people to make noise about this, whether they're just trying to get attention for their personal brand, or who knows, whatever other chaos they're trying to cause. And there are people who engage in this discussion or debate in good faith, and
Yeah.
people who have the technical um, depth to be able to do that. The whole thing is messy. The whole thing is messy.
I genuinely feel that the people that are arguing in good faith, though, are not as polarizing. Because see, this is
You don't hear them as much either.
No, that's true. That is a good point. Okay, so we solved nothing, but that's okay. I
I'm
don't
even
think
more depressed. What are we going to talk about next?
Next we're gonna talk about Seedsigner. That's it. Now it's time for the fun. We're done. We just get that stuff out. It's like a band-aid. We just have to rip that off. We just have to rip that off. That's all. Okay. Well, maybe, you know what? Maybe we'll start first with BTC hardware. Okay. So I do, because obviously I've looked through your stuff, and of course I've got some questions, type of stuff that I've always wanted to ask you. So we're gonna switch gears. We're gonna get over to that. We're gonna stop depressing people with the drama that's going on in Bitcoin, and instead we're gonna stick to some signal. So, like I said, you maintain PC hardware, or you started it, or
It's a one-man show. That's
okay.
yeah, it's BTC Hardware is just me in my basement with 3D printers and electronic components, building things and offering them for sale to Bitcoiners at large. Yeah,
Okay, so you can just do things. Well, this
you can indeed just do things. Yeah.
great. Okay, so let me ask you this: what are the biggest challenges? Broad overview, right? That you faced in sourcing components. Let's say for example, for the Seedsigner, right? Like the
Right.
Seedsigner.
So the really the genesis of BTC Hardware was just wanting to make it easier for people to try a seed signer. And in the beginning, because it's a DIY project, if you buy a Pi 1.3 that's a specific board that doesn't have Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, typically those do not have GPIO headers soldered into them. And the most friction with building a seed signer was, soldering GPIO headers onto a Raspberry Pi board.
Yeah.
So I started, in the beginning when the software is very new, the project's very new. I used to send hardware out to people who were, working to implement Seedsigner into a wallet coordinator. Like I sent Craig Raw Seedsigner, and I've sent, other developers Seedsigner. I think I sent Hugo with Nunchuck one. And I think I know I sent the Spectre guys at least a couple, several years ago. So me putting hardware together in my basement was really just kind of to encourage people to experience what we were building and that there was promise in it and that it was a real viable thing. And then it kind of just grew. As that phase was moving on, we went into the COVID supply chain shock thing, and Raspberry Pis became really difficult to source. And so then BTC Hardware's mission was kind of just to help people find Raspberry Pis. And I was, I've always sold the kits. The basic Seedsigner kit has been $80 since probably early 2021, and I've been able to find creative ways to lower costs and keep it at the same price the whole time. So as I'm soldering Raspberry Pis 40 pins at a time in my basement, like I'm not doing this to become wildly wealthy. It's not the kind of business that scales. But yeah, that was kind of the initial idea, was just to help people who were curious about having a seed signer, who might not have a 3D printer to print an enclosure, or who weren't comfortable soldering, or maybe aren't DIY kind of people, just to reduce the friction involved with trying what we think has turned out to be a really great signing platform. And it's, I think a great FOSS project and stuff. So it was really to kind of support the Seedsigner project and to help promote that model.
Got some comments here from the viewers. Dude has an actual Dexter's Lab. Yeah, so contrary to some belief, I just want to point out to something that you said, right? Some people do enjoy doing something, and it's not just about getting rich, right? Like, I know it sounds crazy, but some people just enjoy doing something because they feel passionate about it. That's okay, right? Like it's okay if earning a living is not or making big money isn't the first thing. It can be number 3 or 4, right? Like what people do matters. So I really think that's I think that's important that you pointed that out.
And that's like Seedsigner occupied this weird sort of space in my head where it's like part obsession, part vocation, and part, who knows what else. Because of my unique background. Like I don't think we want to have a Bitcoin ecosystem where commercially produced wallets are the only option. Obviously, they're going to serve a lot of people. They're going to serve a lot of people, and they create a lot of value for the ecosystem. And there's nothing inherently wrong with using a device like that. But some people, are leery of the amount of trust that goes into using one of those devices, or they're leery of the personal information leak that goes into a lot of times buying or using a commercial hardware wallet, or they live in part of the world where it's really hard to get them, or it could be, a personally jeopardizing privacy leak just to order one in the mail. I think everybody agrees that, they're a great solution, but we also need other options for people that are in different situations. And so, given my background, doing forensics and having seen some of the vulnerabilities in pretty large secure platforms, secure hardware platforms, I just wanted there to be something else out there that scratched that itch for people like me or people who are skeptics. And so it's been an uphill battle as the Seedsigner project's grown. And another thing that BC Hardware Solutions has helped with is that it enables me to travel to different places, to talk to Bitcoiners in person about Seedsigner, and to make presentations, and to set up a table at conferences and do demos, go to meetups, and meet with Bitcoiners in small groups, and talk about the importance of the Seedsigner project. So the money that the business brings in allows me to cover small little expenses that have to do with things like web hosting for seedsigner.com, and just little things that come up like that. But then also to be able to travel to the Bitcoin conference, or to be able to, over this last spring, I went to the Grand Rapids Bitcoin meetup up in Michigan and did a presentation there. Or I've gone to a little bit earlier this year, I went to the Kansas City Bitcoiners meetup. It tends to be within driving distance for me because I'm in the middle of the country in the Midwest. But yeah, you said a mouthful when you said it's not about trying to get rich off of this thing. It's just I'm not in a position where I can take money out of my family's budget to be able to fly to present at a conference if I've been invited to do that. So BC Hardware Solutions helps me square the circle, and so I can pay for those things out of the business's budget, and not have to take that money out of my family's budget. It also, it as I talked about business cycles before, there have been times where BC Hardware Solutions has been a lot more active, and then there's been times when it's not as active, and a lot of that correlates with the Bitcoin price and how excited people are about Bitcoin appreciating and stuff.
Yep.
So when Bitcoin's gotten hot, I've been able to buy a few like nice to haves for my family,
Mhm.
like a computer for the kids to use in the kitchen and stuff like that. Things that I can also use during the course of like operating the company, so I can kind of check two boxes with them.
Mm.
Um, but and BC Hardware Solutions, frankly, has benefited from uh, the appreciation of the Bitcoin price. So when I started it in mid to late 2021,
Mhm.
um, I was piling into with money that I was making from selling seed centers. I was piling into Bitcoin when it was trading between $15,000 and $20,000, and I mostly hold that Bitcoin for the future. I there are people that I can settle invoices with in Bitcoin, and the company uses Bitcoin for a lot of the, uh, like I can't pay for Raspberry Pi boards with Bitcoin, but I can pay for aluminum enclosures that a guy in France makes,
Mhm.
as well as some other things. So I actively use Bitcoin in the business, but overall, it's an accumulative strategy since we're talking about, businesses accumulating Bitcoin. So as I was buying into Bitcoin, around $20,000, I've held on to most of that Bitcoin. So it has helped scale up some of the things that we've been trying to do. Which one of the things we'll talk about is this custom display hat that I've worked with some other Bitcoiners to create. That I'm in the process of scaling up and being able to make available to other Bitcoiners in different parts of the world that also sell. Um, I feel like the BC Hardware Solutions apologist here, but let me tell you one more story, kind of about the way things have evolved. So there's a Bitcoiner in El Salvador who reached out to me, and it was somebody that I already knew. His name's Ronnie, and
Mhm.
him and a partner were opening this business in El Zante called uh, the Bitcoin Hardware Store. And he's a good guy, and he was wanting to stock seed signers in the Bitcoin Hardware Store, um, virtually from the beginning with the company, alongside other, alongside Trezors and Cold Cards and other commercial hardware wallets. And he initially basically asked me to sell Seedsigners to him that he could then mark up and resell in the store. And that's like, this is something that's come up multiple times with other people in different parts of the world, in Australia and Canada and Europe, people who want to somehow buy the finished Seedsigners or the kits from me.
Mhm.
And as with Ronnie, I'm happy to show you where to buy everything, and you can buy it yourself. I'll make sure they're open source anyway, but I'll make sure you have the files for enclosures. You can buy a $150 3D printer that will print enclosures. And basically, like, the ethos is not me building Seedsigners and selling them to everybody in all corners of the world. The ethos is more people selling Seedsigners in their part of the world,
Mhm.
backed by their reputation in their local Bitcoin community. And the whole, my vision for it is people operating in different parts of the world at a kind of cottage level scale, to where they can just help build them for people in their local area who may be less technically inclined, or who might need somebody to explain how to assemble it or how it works or stuff. So I have kind of repeatedly passed on these opportunities to try and grow this to a, a larger scale than what it's become, I guess I'll say.
Mm. The custom hat that you're talking about, can you explain a little bit more about that? Is it because the people can customize the information that appears on the screen? It's like more customizable, or you can give us a little
It's
more details on
so
this?
yeah, like from the beginning, I should have brought one to show me. But the seed signer has been very closely paired with a very specific display hat. And for
Yeah.
people who are less technical,
Which one is
it's
it?
a
The
little
Lily
circuit
one?
board that you put on top of the Raspberry Pi that gives you a small screen and buttons and a thumbstick, and basically allows you to interact with the device. Um, we've been sort of married to that particular piece of hardware since the project's beginning. And on the positive side, it's great because they're inexpensive, and they're made by a Chinese company called Waveshare.
Mhm.
So they're ubiquitously available in America and Europe and China and South America, really Africa, anywhere in the world that you would want to build a seed center. It's not that challenging to get one of these inexpensive display hats that fit on top of a Raspberry Pi. But on the flip side, it has a very small screen that is 240 pixels by 240 pixels. So people like myself who are, in their mid 40s or beyond, who have trouble, reading really small small print rather, on backlit screens, it's a friction point. It's a real estate problem in terms of the user
Yeah.
interface and how much information we can cram into that small space. The physical experience of using one of these display hats with a thumbstick has been a little bit. There's been a little bit of friction of that in terms of designing a topper for the thumbstick that works properly, or maybe you just leave the topper off and it hurts your thumb. Um, it's not so much something that's associated with Waveshare, but the Raspberry Pi Zero uses a micro USB cable, which over time is something that people are less and less likely to have in their house, because everything's, primarily been migrating to USB-C. And there's been, a little bit of friction with the micro SD port rather, on Raspberry Pis, because it's not spring loaded. So basically,
Mm.
with this
Yeah.
new display hat, the idea was, what if we created a new display hat from scratch that was intended to be a seed signer right from the get-go? And so what would we do? We would give it a little bit bigger screen. We experimented with a few different sizes of screens, and we
Mhm.
initially overshot it and implemented a screen that was a little bit too big, and it made the device a little too clunky or cumbersome. So we dialed back the screen size and found what we like to think is kind of the Goldilocks size for the screen. And then instead of the little thumbstick, we implemented a really simple D-pad style controller, just by laying out simple buttons in a D-pad style layout that mimics the exact same control scheme. So it's kind of a drop-in replacement for the thumbstick. And then we also incorporated a USB-C cable that is still power only, and it's on the underside of the circuit board instead of the top, because when it was in the top, it tended to kind of get in the way when you're holding a
Yeah.
Seedsigner up. So we moved it to the bottom and switched to USB-C. It's still hardwired for power only. And with this particular form factor, it's not built into the circuit board, but we left room to implement a spring-loaded micro USB extension so that it's just a small quality of life improvement. And maybe we can bring up a picture of the device or something, but it kind of changed the form factor of a Seedsigner to make it a little bit bigger, a little more comfortable to hold in your hands, and without changing anything fundamental about, the air gapping assurances around the Raspberry Pi not having any sort of Wi-Fi communications, and all of the software. It's basically the same software that still operates in RAM and still has the security assurances that go along with that. So saw this opportunity, and I worked with a really amazing Dutch Bitcoiner who is, and I'm not sure if he's an electrical engineer in terms of his day job, but circuit board design is within his skill set, and he's been very generous with his time and expertise. You're not going to find it on seedsigner.com, but you would find it at BTC Hardware Solutions, or I can send you a tweet. We're still in the process of rolling this thing out, so I wanted to do kind of a soft launch where we just kind of got into people's hands and made sure that there weren't any technical issues we didn't anticipate, and that it was something that honestly really resonated with people, because who knows, maybe we build this thing and people hold it in their hands and say like, nah, I think I'll stick with my original Seedsigner. But I've gotten enough of them out there into the wild that I've gotten almost universally good feedback from people about the form factor and how it fits in your hands, being a little bit bigger but not too big, and the size of the screen.
Is that it here? The newer one?
Yeah, that's it right there. And one more benefit of the larger screen is that if you've used a Seedsigner, you know that depending, the screen size dictates how much information you can fit in a QR frame.
Yes.
And so with a larger screen, we can push more information through in QR. And so it's less time holding that device up in front of your webcam trying to push a signed transaction back. So that's just kind of the first very basic reference enclosure design. And one more thing, we were able to bring the pill shape back. So the actual circuit board that's inside of that new Seedsigner Plus is actually pill shaped, which was kind of a fun minor detail. So
I think it's very cool. I like it a lot, especially the bigger screen. This is So
it was something that people had been asking for. And one more detail that I'll throw out with it is so this board design is going to be open sourced. I'm just waiting. I just placed an order for a much larger batch of these, and I'm going to be offering them for sale to other people that build Seedsigners in different parts of the world. One of the opportunities with this was to be able to take a little bit of the money that's brought in on each board and redirect that to our longest running contributors with the project. So basically our lead maintainer, who's a great Bitcoiner named Nick, and then Keith Mukai, who's our lead developer. So for the time being, I'll continue to think about this, but for the time being, a portion of the money that either retail or resellers pay for these boards is going to get directed to Keith and Nick. And I'm not framing this as a donation or anything like that. It's just they have done so much to create value with Seedsigner, and it's only fair that if we're selling these, that some of the revenue goes back to them. But as I was saying, once these boards are launched and available, the circuit board design for these are going to be posted to GitHub, and maybe people will find improvements, or maybe people want to do a production run themselves and not have to deal with me, which is 100% okay. And that's the ethos of the Seedsigner project. Another interesting thing we're going to be able to do is there are I can't think of the board house that does this, but we're going to upload the design to a circuit board company that will basically just let people come in and buy their own small batches of them. So if you want to have a really small run of 3 or 5 boards run, you're going to pay a premium because it's a small batch size. But if you don't want to deal with my company because of, you're worried about OPSEC or leaking any information that way, like, you'll be able to order a circuit board yourself and do the remainder of the assembly yourself. So I'm personally really trying to find this balance between, like, yes, I've invested some money in having this design and having prototypes made and stuff. And by selling them, I will realize some revenue from that. But we want to do it in an open source way where we put the designs out there, and people can find improvements, or they can just use the design to have their own boards made. It's all a process, and I don't claim to have all the answers, but we're trying to do this in a Bitcoin ethos kind of way.
Yeah, no, I really like that. And this is something that has always, I mean, from the beginning, from the first time I ever heard about your project, I feel like this was in, oh, go ahead. You were going to say something?
I'm sorry. I just want to say one more thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
My
They're here
mind
to
works
listen to
this
you,
way
Matt. So-
because I anticipate the skeptics, and this is not any sort of hardware migration or anything like that. The WaveShare hats are going to be perpetually supported into the future. So if people don't want to deal with one of these custom hats, like, there is no plans to phase out the WaveShare hats. The plan is actually to increase the amount of different hardware platforms that we support, different even screen sizes beyond this. And we think we can manage it within a single repo, but we're not phasing out the WaveShare hats. You'll still be able to buy the parts you need to build a Seedsigner completely off the shelf from retailers that have nothing to do with anything Bitcoin, far into the future. So I just want to say that.
Has anybody tried to port the Seedsigner code over to like an M5 stack or like one of those little devices?
Yeah, that's something that Keith has been tinkering with for years now, and he's the lower level language that you would need to do that, be that Rust or MicroPython or C or whatever it was. Keith is more of a higher level program, so he has made some amazing progress in that regard, but it's not natively in his wheelhouse, so it's a little bit slower going. And we've been fortunate to get some help from people who that is more of their technical specialization. But he's done some significant experimentation with especially the ESP32 microcontroller ecosystem, as well as the Raspberry Pi Pico ecosystem. And we're kind of the sort of last thing we need to figure out is whether or not we can do QR code scanning with dedicated hardware or not. So the ESP32s haven't quite gotten fast enough to where they're really good at doing barcode scanning or QR code scanning, as well as other things like support UI. And we obviously need to do both. So, and this is something that different projects have solved for in different ways. Like, if you look at the Cold Card Q, they obviously use a microcontroller, and for performance issues, they implemented a dedicated QR scanning module, presumably so that they wouldn't lose performance from the main microcontroller unit to support the QR code scanning. I think people who know more about that ecosystem than I do have led me to believe that Moore's Law is still kind of a thing in the microcontroller ecosystem. And so we may get to a point where you can support, a UI as well as scanning with a simple optical camera on a microcontroller, but we're kind of waiting to see where the power that's built into these microcontrollers kind of tops out in terms of making them cost effective and what's available. But to answer your original question, it is being looked into because, looking down the road, myself and a couple of our other contributors would really like to be able to produce an all-in-one reference board that is an air-gapped amnesiac signing device, and it's built to be that thing. So there's a custom circuit board as well as still keeping alive the ability to use some of these developer boards, as well as peripherals like the Waveshare hat to be able to still build from off
Hmm.
the shelf components. But it would be really cool to have a stateless amnesiac signing device that was a fully open source thing, not just open source in terms of being able to audit the code, but hardware designs that are open source too, such that, say, an organization like the Human Rights Foundation, if they have an opportunity to put 5,000 signing devices into a refugee camp or some sort of other area where people are open to Bitcoin and they want to be able to save with Bitcoin, they something like this would exist to where you can build those uh, signing devices at an extremely low cost
Hmm.
using open source intellectual property that's been just put out there for that sort of express purpose. There are people who could for sure also build businesses around that, producing them and selling them to people. But um, that's kind of like a medium to long term goal is getting to a microcontroller platform and getting um, a reference design for a stateless signing device. But anyhow, that's me talking a lot, answering a simple question.
I especially, I am especially attracted to the microcontroller world because
Yeah.
I find the barrier to entry is a lot lower for people like me who it's like, I'm able to I'm able to fork other people's code. I can look through code. I can figure out how to debug some errors, right? But I don't know how to create anything from scratch. So for me, right, like being able to use microcontrollers, for whatever reason, I have found that barrier to entry to be a lot lower. But the screen share that I was doing before, I don't know if you had ever seen that particular device, but
Mm-mm.
that is the new M5 IoT development kit with it has a touch screen on it. So it's got
And
touch screen, it's got Wi-Fi. It's like we're getting there. I feel like we're getting there with the microcontrollers.
right,
So
and I will give a shout out to a couple other DIY projects that are working on kind of similar with a similar mission that we are. So the one that you had talked about, I think it was yesterday or the day before, Spectre DIY
sure.
has been
Yeah.
around for a long time. They're at least currently they're limited to a very specific hardware set. But there's another project called Crux. It's
Yes.
KRUX,
TC always
and
talks about it.
right, and they have done some great work on implementing air gap signing for some of these. I'm not deep into their projects, so I don't know the specifics about which hardware platforms, but they do work on multiple hardware platforms, and I want to say the M5 stack is a portion of those.
Hmm.
Um, so they may already be working on or have implemented support for that particular board. There's trade-offs with everything. Like that one board that you were showing uh, as you noted, Wi-Fi built into it,
Yeah.
and with IoT becoming a thing, they tend to build Wi-Fi into a lot of these development boards by default because of the
Mhm.
nature of their intended use.
Yes.
Um, but what we really need is not just Seedsigner. We need Seedsigner and Crux and Spectre DIY, and maybe there's probably room for projects beyond that, so that we can have a healthy ecosystem that's addressing the focuses of different users. I mean, Spectre DIY is probably a little more technical device in terms of the UI and some of the capability and the workflows. I mean, they support Liquid, as well as scripting on top of Bitcoin for different multi-sig setups and stuff like that. And Crux also does a great job. They pack a lot of features that are experimental or not as widely used in the Bitcoin ecosystem, so that people can experiment with different technical solutions. And with Seed Center, we kind of try to be this sort of in the middle thing where we focus more on the user experience and the user interface and making it something that a less technical Bitcoiner who might be less inclined to build something, it's more approachable for them, because we've really thought a lot about the workflows that we've built into the device. And while we do have some advanced functionality, we tend to turn that off by default so that it doesn't crowd the decision tree for less technical users or put elements in the user interface that might confuse them. So there's already kind of this small DIY open source ecosystem for doing cold storage and saving with Bitcoin that's in existence, and we're just trying to be a part of growing that and keeping it vibrant so that it can be sort of this counterbalance to the more consumer slash manufactured. Again, I would say this, not that there's anything wrong with that, but if the commercial hardware wallet industry grows to a certain size, it becomes eligible for capture either by state level entities or by technocrats who control, a lot of the hardware supply chain, or just malicious actors who might have access to certain parts of the supply chain. So having this counterbalance that allows people to build their own thing and use it, sort of, you can think of it as just kind of a force that helps keeps people in the industry honest, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And actually, to your point, right, about what you were talking about capture, it's interesting because I ended up saving this post of yours for this show. Tell me you've read BitKey's Terms of Service without telling me you've read BitKey's Terms of Service, right? And this is KYC's. The title here of Tyler Durden's article is KYC, crypto's quiet kill switch. So I think to your point, right?
You always seem to like the tweets that I think are super high signal and end up getting like 3 or 4 likes in total.
Yep. Oh, yeah, no, dude, of course, because so this is something that we end up learning, right? In at least in social media, the highest signal stuff actually gets, number one, the lowest engagement, and number two, gets understood the least, whereas the dumbest, lowest common denominator type of stuff gets the most engagement.
Those are the ones that blow up. Yeah.
Yeah. Those are the ones that, like, I mean, you can sit there and you can just tweet, I love Bitcoin every single day, and do significantly better than anybody that is actually putting any real thought into their post.
Isn't that Bitcoin therapist's whole business model?
Oh, yeah, man. It totally is, and it's just, it's
Pete Rizzo, who's it's such a shame to see his account go the way it has. But anyhow, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, it's okay. Hey, look, if we could monetize bookmarks like him, we would be, so I'll take my cheap shots at Pete as well, because I can't help it. But yeah, man, it's, this is really a project like yours. To me, is really this is key in terms of, I hate using these types of terms, right? But like the Bitcoin ethos, right? For me, it's much more about freedom maximalism, right? Like this is the way I look at it. If I need to go a little further, I'll characterize it as personal freedom maximalism, right? Because that to me is the highest degree of freedom an individual can pursue in society.
Right.
Is personal
preserving freedom. Optionality.
Yes.
And preserving privacy. For a lot of people to be able to build these devices and use them in different parts of the world. In terms of the code being open source, I've seen it slowly happen over time. But Seedsigner is, being used by more and more people. There's a couple of forks of Seedsigner that have pretty significant popularity. And so, yeah, but the optionality, to get back to that, I think rather than having everyone herded into a certain hardware wallet ecosystem to ultimately have their, that is kind of like the Pied Piper leading us into a 6102 at some point. Yeah, options are good. Preserving options are good. And the Bitcoin ethos, as much as it is beleaguered, is a real thing. And there are people out there building in the spirit of Bitcoin, whatever,
yes.
Decentralized, open source, opt-in, all that kind of stuff.
And speaking of which, I want to give a shout out to a fellow Bitcoiner, Austin, right? Who He's part of the Austin Bit Devs, like kind of like one of their head guys, doing a lot of projects there, working on Noster. I mean, look, a lot of these guys, it's very interesting. You're gonna get you're gonna get the the Prestone fishes and all of these people in front of your face saying the fancy words that make you feel good about your dollar sacks and everything, but the real signal, which is what's actually about what's being built in the space, the actual things that are helping to maintain and propel personal freedom, or as you indicated or called it, optionality. This is the real signal. Like this is the real signal. And this is what I ended up learning when I came into the space. And I was one of these people listening to these hopium idiots, and I ended up figuring out that it was fast food, right? I feel great listening to it, but then it doesn't, I walk away and I'm empty again, right? I need something else. And what did I find that was actually, that was actual sustenance? The actual sustenance was, hey, this is what's actually being built in the space. This is how it's anti-fragile. This is how things stay resilient and possibly even increase in decentralization, because let's face it, right? Like Bitcoin has issues, like we talk about minor centralization and stuff like that. I do think that the hardware manufacturers, right? There's not very many of them, right? So there aren't many. So there's, as we know, there's very few chip makers. Number one. Number two, we have just as few, maybe slightly more actual minor manufacturers, right? Then we go to the hardware wallets, the signing devices. It's just a handful as well. So you talk about capture, that is a real thing. Now, I'm not one of those people who sits there with the tinfoil hat about the 6102, because in my eyes, our life is 6102'd. I don't like. To me, it's just the prison walls you can't see. That's all, but they're there.
Yeah.
So I'm not 100% sure about that. However,
Trump buying 10% of Intel got my attention with what
bingo.
Michael Saylor's doing.
Yes.
But yeah, we'll see.
And then they mentioned Lockheed Martin. Okay. So they also that there was a comment made by Howard Lutnick about Lockheed Martin. So look at that, huh? They want to get into defense, which they pretty much already own. Anyways, man, I'm so sorry. Our hour, like, just it totally flew by, and we're gonna wrap it up. But before we do, can you just let the viewers and listeners know how can they reach you? How can they find Seedsigner? How can they find BTC hardware? And everything Seed is going to say is going to be in the show notes if you want to go check it out. Go ahead, my friend.
Yeah, no, my little corner of Twitter is the screen name that I think is displayed right now. But to follow the Seedsigner project more broadly, it's just at Seedsigner on the socials or seedsigner.com. You can go there to learn about the ethos behind the project, behind the technical details of what makes Seedsigner what we think is a really good idea, and you can learn how to build one. Everything from where to buy the components, to videos on how to put it together, to Ben Sessions just did an amazing video that's kind of an update on Seedsigner and how to use one. And so, yeah, seedsigner.com. And other thing I'll put a plug in for is if you're a Seedsigner user and you love it, or if you just realize that it's an important thing for Seedsigner to exist, we have a donation workflow on our website where you can donate not to me, but to our most active technical contributors. And they always appreciate anything that people are able to share with them in terms of value. So I'll end with that.
Very nice. Very nice. Guys, all of that information about Seedsigner is going to be in the show notes. That's going to do it for this episode of Pleb Underground. Guys, normally we do a monthly roundtable, but as you know, we've been splitting this up and we've been doing 2 of them every month. And guess what? Monday is our next roundtable. It's going to be lots of fun. Going to be humble, Ulrich. It's going to be lots of drama. Hope to see you guys there. It's going to be Monday night, Labor Day, right? Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern. Hope to catch you there. Seed, thank you again for joining me on the show, man. It was absolutely awesome. And guys, I will catch you on the next one. Peace.